Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So we'll do a tight show this week. We'll cover a couple of topics. It's an announcement-heavy time period we're covering here, but we'll start with what we're driving. And Sam, you are in the BMW 740e. Is it also not a driver's car like I found the 530 to be?
It is even less of a driver's car than the 5 Series. But, you know, the 7 Series, you know, was never really meant to be as much of a driver's car as the smaller BMWs. You know, it was always more the luxury model, you know, going up against the Mercedes. And, you know, the latest, you know, the last couple of generations have been that even more so. But, you know, that said, you know, it doesn't mean, you know, it's not a surprisingly high performance car. And, you know, perhaps, you know, one of the world's most expensive economy cars.
That's one way to look at it. It is a premium economy car. What kind of economy are you getting out of it?
Well, yeah, it's actually gone now. So it's past tense. I went back yesterday, and we'll talk about the next car next week. But yeah, it was the 740e is the one I was driving. I was originally scheduled to get an Alpina B7, but unfortunately that one had to go back about a week before it arrived in my garage. So they substituted a 740e, which I had actually been hoping to drive for quite a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not an even trade.
No, but I mean, it's certainly not an entirely even trade. But as I said, you know, the 740e is a variant that I have been wanting to try out for quite some time. It has basically the same powertrain that was in the X5 plug-in hybrid, the X5 eDrive that I drove some months back. And it's, you know, it's basically variations of this powertrain are what are in most of BMW's plug-in hybrid models right now. And, you know,
so, I found that to be really good in the X5 eDrive.
Yeah, it is. It's an excellent powertrain. You know, it's the 2-liter turbo, 4-cylinder with 255 horsepower, which is, you know, it's pretty good. You know, they haven't really toned it down in this application. It's a pretty strong engine by itself. And then, you know, that's backed up with a 111 horsepower electric motor that's sandwiched between the engine's flywheel and the 8-speed automatic transmission. And of course, you know, being an electric motor, it, you know, produces its peak torque right from 0 RPM, which in this case is 184 foot-pounds of torque. So, you know, this thing's got plenty of grunt, which, you know, for a car that weighs, you know, well in excess of 2 tons, you know, it's still, you know, they officially they list the 0 to 60 time as 5.1 seconds, which is pretty impressive for a car that
very quick,
42 miles per gallon.
Yeah, so that's 184 pound-feet of torque from the electric motor, right?
184 from the electric motor,
and then additional
combined, whatever. Yeah, the combined total between the, you know, when you max out between the electric motor and the engine comes to 369.
Right. So,
and, you know, it's a big, broad, flat torque curve. So, I mean, you know, if you've ever driven a Prius, you know, it is, shall we say, an unexciting experience to accelerate. This one is not.
Right. I didn't find that with the eDrive powertrain. I thought it was, it actually had a little bit of like joie de vivre, if I'm going to use a French word or French words, but it felt good.
Yeah. You know, it's actually something you might expect in, say, a driver's car.
Correct. Hey,
you know, and, you know, and this combination of the engine and the electric drive is paired up with a 9.2 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery that sits in the back underneath the cargo floor in the trunk. So it, you know, compromises the trunk space a bit. I think you're left with about 13 cubic feet. But you know, that's enough to give it about, you know, 14, 15 miles of all electric driving. And, you know, as it turned out, even, you know, with a couple of highway trips, to Dearborn and Detroit during the time I had this car, I still spent, most of my urban time driving the car in electric only mode, which, is probably why it got, almost 43 miles per gallon overall for the week, which, like I say, for a car, this size, it's 126 inch wheelbase, so this is a 12.5 foot or 10.5 foot long wheelbase. This is a massive car. And, if you're riding in the back, you can just stretch right out. This one didn't have, executive style seating or anything with, that reclines and had, footrests that come out, but you still have, a ton of space in the back of this thing. And, it's funny. I don't know if you remember back around 2008 or 2009, Rolls-Royce built a prototype all electric Phantom that they took around and they showed to a bunch of customers, and they showed it off at some auto shows and things like that. And they opted not to build it. And they said at the time that, they felt that, this wasn't suitable for a Rolls-Royce, which I always thought was kind of odd. Because, I think at the, as it was configured at the time, it probably had something like 150 mile range, if I recall correctly. And, the Phantom, is very much not a driver's car. It's a chauffeur's car.
Right.
It's a car to be driven in. And so, part of, why Rolls-Royce has always given their cars, names like Ghost and Phantom and Dawn, is because they've always been really supremely quiet and refined. And it always struck me that an electric drivetrain in a car like that would actually be the perfect drivetrain for that kind of car.
Well, that's what they try to make their combustion engines feel like anyway. Right. Is an electric motor.
And the thing is, it's not like people tend to take long road trips in a car like the Phantom. It's something that, they go, they get driven from the country house into the city or something like that, or from the Hamptons into Manhattan, and get dropped off. If they're taking long road trips, the chauffeur drops them off at the airport where they hop into their Gulfstream for the long haul. So it's not like you need a really long range in a car like the Phantom, I think for most people. For the way most owners are going to use that type of car. So it always struck me that they opted not to do that, the electric drive version of that. But now, with a new Phantom coming shortly, I think the new Phantom is going to be unveiled, I think, in late July. This powertrain, or perhaps a variant of it, maybe with a 6-cylinder instead of the 4-cylinder, would be an almost perfect combination for a car like the Phantom. Because, you can drive around silently and zero emissions most of the time, for a pretty good haul. And, in a car the size of the Phantom, you could even put a bigger battery in it, get it up to 25 miles of electric range.
Well, and the Phantom has that like double hull construction anyway.
Yeah.
So you could conceivably use some of the fact that size and price is really not much of an object with that car. And, almost go like a Tesla where you're filling the floor with batteries, or, depending on how much BMW architecture the next Phantom shares, but you've got enough size where you're not dealing with a 13 cubic foot trunk in a $300,000 car. Like you can solve those problems with money.
Oh, yeah, pretty easily. So I think I've heard rumors that there will be a plug-in hybrid variant of the next Phantom, and if they do some variation of this powertrain in their, at least the electric drive part of it, I think Phantom owners will be very content with that. In traditional Rolls-Royce style, back in the days, prior to when BMW took over the Rolls-Royce brand, they never listed the power output of their engines. They were always listed as simply as adequate.
Adequate. That's what I strive for, is adequacy.
And this powertrain would absolutely be, more than adequate for a Phantom.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's going to be so quiet. I mean, the electric cars, even the hybrids, have to have the little, sort of beeper noisemaker kind of things now, because they're so quiet that people don't hear them and they get hit by them.
Yeah.
So I think it achieves that goal.
Yeah. So, the big thing, the powertrain is excellent. Obviously with a car this size, you have to take somewhat more care in maneuvering around tight spaces and parking lots. I did have some issues trying to use the active park assist in this one. For some reason, it seemed more finicky than in the 5 Series when I tried it in that one. In terms of detecting the parking spaces, so I'm not sure what was going on there. But overall, it was fine. Extremely smooth, comfortable ride. It pretty much absorbed everything the roads around here could throw at it. So it was a very content place to spend time, and it would be a great road trip car. But certainly not not the kind of car that say someone who is enamored with an M4 or an M2 might want to opt for.
Yeah, and I took a little bit of abuse about that when I talked about the 5 Series not being a driver's car, because I was talking specifically about my experience with the 530, which is sort of the least drivery of the 5 Series range. If you want more of a driver's car, jump up to like the 540. But the fact remains that the things I didn't like about the 530 are still there in the 540. So it's maybe a little bit more powerful, a little bit more sprightly, but you still, it's not going to do it. And that's from everything I've gleaned about that car. So it's not, the 7 is perfectly fine not being a driver's car. It is just an enormous luxury car. And it is what it's supposed to be. What was the price on yours?
Just over $100,000.
Well, that's not too bad. I say that's not too bad because
for a car that gets near Prius fuel economy, and will haul any wealthy person around in extreme comfort, perfectly adequate. No, it's a really nice car. And it has all, most of the same characteristics you'll find in most current BMWs. You've got, the latest generation iDrive, which, is much improved. It still doesn't support Android Auto or CarPlay, although I think you can get CarPlay support as an option. BMW, for some reason, has decided they don't want to support Android Auto. So whatever. And it also has the gesture control system, which, is the same as what's in the 5 Series, which, as we talked about before, is more of an experiment right now. It's a proof of concept right now rather than anything truly useful. But, aside from that, it's got all the other features. It's got really nice adaptive cruise control and the lane keeping system. The lane keeping system actually did not work as well as the one in the 5 Series in terms of, actually centering the car in the lane. It was reasonably reliable in terms of detecting the lanes, but it didn't really try to center the car in the lane.
Now, is that because it's different, like an older generation of technology?
It's an older generation of the system. So the 5 Series has an updated version of that. And I would expect, maybe in the 2018 models, maybe 2018 or 2019 models, they'll update the system in the 7 Series to the same level of functionality.
All right.
So what about you? What are you driving?
I'm driving something that is more than perfectly adequate. I've got a 2017 Ford F-250 Super Duty with the FX4 package and 4-wheel drive and the 6.7 liter Power Stroke diesel.
Sounds like the one I had a few weeks back.
And it's a regular cab, and this is a lot of truck.
It is. Long bed?
Yes.
Even better. Could have used that when I had it.
Yeah, I'm gonna find some mulch to get. So the thing that I immediately go to is because of the way this truck is spec'd. It reminds me of every truck I rode in at every sort of blue collar manual labor summer job I ever had while I was in college.
A tad bouncy?
It's very stiff because of the FX4 suspension, and it's it's a burly truck, but I think those are the things that actually endear it to me as well, or endear me to it. I don't know how to use that phrase, but it's not like a cowboy Cadillac. It looks fantastic. Something about that short, standard cab, long bed kind of thing just makes it look burly, and it's definitely burly, and it's really
Big truck should be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even that expensive. I say that sort of realizing that I'm still talking about a roughly $50,000 truck. But it's, I really do. I like the styling of the new Super Duties. They've gone to the aluminum construction as well. And, I think it might've been Gordon Plato who did this one too. He did the F-150. Mm-hmm. You get just a like great sort of classic Ford truck look to these, which I realized we're talking about the way it looks versus like the actual work it can do. That's kind of because I have no doubt this truck is going to be able to do heavy duty work. All of the big trucks in their heavy duty guys are really, really capable. This one is no different. It's the most updated. And it's very well thought out. It has the extra stuff in the bed for tie downs, and mine has running boards and stuff. But it's, they all have integrated trailer brakes now. It's, it's got a stout hitch on it. This is a truck. Like, I really just was like thinking, like, I need to find somebody who has a car trailer that needs to be towed somewhere and just like take a day off work and go tow it. Because it's
drive around your neighborhood and find some stumps to pull out.
Yeah. Oh, I've got some of my own. Ford owns the truck market to a large degree for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure General Motors and Chrysler might argue with. But I wasn't that keen on the older Super Duties, the trucks that this replaced. I just felt like they were really old, really long in the tooth, and they'd been updated a bunch, but they were still they felt cheap. They didn't appear to have that longevity. You see a lot of not too old trucks that they get beat up fast. Part of that is because of the way they're used, but part of it to me said like, they start to rust and stuff pretty quick. Aluminum construction should alleviate some of that, and it should help with the fuel economy. I haven't really made this engine, this 6.7 liter Power Stroke, do any hard work, but it's getting 19 miles to the gallon.
That's pretty good. I think
it's ridiculous.
I got about 14, between 14 and 15 with the one I had, but it was a crew cab, and I actually did use it to haul lumber from my deck. So yeah, and
I'm going to I legitimately am going to get some mulch and maybe some gravel or something too. So I will use it as a truck and try to report back next week. But I'm actually really pleased that they put these in the fleet.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, you drove the Silverado 2500 recently.
Yeah.
With the Duramax 6.6 in there. Which one do you prefer? Do you have a preference between these two trucks?
I like the Duramax better. And that was one of the things that I noticed was, even though, the Power Stroke, this is a new Power Stroke, right? Or significantly updated?
Yeah, it's an updated one, yeah.
It feels...
it every few years.
It's definitely powerful. There's no doubt about that. But it also feels soft off the line, where the new Duramax was a lot more responsive. I don't know whether it's like turbo lag or what. Again, these are not back-to-back impressions. So I just remember being very impressed with the Duramax, where the older Duramax was laggy and the new one isn't. Both of these engines start up real quick. They're not super loud diesely, but the new Duramax is very refined. I think it's got a little bit of an edge on this one.
It's also possible that part of that is it may be related to transmissions too. So they may be tuning it, to not be quite as aggressive, to maybe tone down the torque a little bit from the engine right off the line, to reduce the strain on the transmission. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating about, what might be causing what you're experiencing, or it could be the engine. I mean, both of them use variable geometry turbochargers now. So, they shouldn't really have much of a problem with turbo lag.
No, it's not. And I don't want to say lag, because it's not lag like in the old way. It's just, it feels soft, and part of that is maybe that I know there's that much, so much there. But for whatever reason, you really got to toe into it to get it. that's probably partially by design. So maybe it's just a calibration thing. If you're getting all the whatever 900 something pound-feet of torque it has right at like 2 miles an hour, you're just going to light up the back tires and nobody's going to be happy. So even if they're not trying to save the transmission, it's a calculated move to just make the thing pleasant and manageable to drive. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just calibration or, even just gear ratios, just.
Yeah, it could be a number of different factors. Have to look at the details on the gearing and everything to see.
And put a load on it, and the whole situation changes. You want that soft throttle response. Mm-hmm. So, I can't complain about this in any way. And I had lots of complaints about the old Super Duty. And if, I guess the interior. Again, it's not, I keep saying again a lot, but it's not the like cushy trucks. So it has the rubber mats, it has the cloth seats. The seats are not as comfortable as the GM trucks either. The materials inside they're a lot better than they were. I still don't think they're as good as everybody else, or maybe they're just as good as everybody else. Not, really sort of like you'd expect a new truck from the company that claims they're the leader in the segment and plays with the numbers enough to make it appear that way. You'd expect a little bit extra, but we're getting down to real like picky details. So
since you have an FX4, I'm guessing that's an XLT trim.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have all the shiny, quite as much shiny chrome all over the grill and the bumpers and everything.
No, it looks rugged. I love that. I love the way it looks. It actually, it looks like it has manual locking front hubs, which I thought was weird. I haven't inspected. So again, I've only had it a couple days.
Pretty sure they don't actually have manual hubs.
Yeah, I was going to say that's
anything, but I think it's just the caps that they put on there, kind of give it that look.
Yeah, I was like, there's retro, and then there's just masochism. Don't do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that certainly none of the domestic big trucks have manual hubs anymore. I'm not sure if there's anything that's available overseas that still does. But
I'm sure there is in some market where there's
yeah,
but it's
some inexpensive. I mean, you could probably get a version of the Toyota Hilux somewhere, with manual locking hubs.
Yeah. I remember the ads
in Southeast Asia or somewhere.
I remember the ads in the 80s where they were Chevy ads, and the Chevy trucks had the automatic locking hubs, and they made a big thing where the ad had the guy in the Ford who had to get out and lock the hubs, and the Chevy truck drives around him. Yeah.
Well, quick story, back to the early 90s, when I was working for Kelsey Hayes at the time, and we were doing our winter testing in International Falls, Minnesota on a frozen lake. And towards the end of the winter testing season, you start to get the ice starts to melt. During most of the winter, the ice is about, 2.5, 3 feet thick, but you start getting the ice melting near the shore first. And one day we were, it was like a Sunday afternoon, I think. I was inside the lodge having some lunch, and there's a big window that's overlooking the lake. And one of my coworkers had been out on the ice doing testing with a Ford pickup, and it had manual locking hubs on it. And he had been doing 2-wheel drive testing, because we did all our ABS testing with 2-wheel drive and in 4-wheel drive and everything else. He'd been running in 2-wheel drive, and he was coming back onto shore, and around at the edge, it started, it was getting slushy and wet, and he got into that and got stuck. And it was still in 2-wheel drive. And, because it had manual hubs on there, we were sitting there eating lunch, watching him climb out through the window of the truck onto the hood, laying across the hood, reaching down, trying to reach down and lock the hubs while he was laying across the hood of this truck. It was hysterical.
You can't do that on this truck. It's so tall.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to reach it unless, you had gorilla arms. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad that they make trucks like this. This is a nice rugged truck. It's a truck that just brings me back to summers of my youth when I didn't have rotator cuff injuries. So anyway, let's move on to some news this week. Big news that it's sort of like the news gift that keeps on giving. And we talked about it last week. We talked about Tesla, and we said like, no, they won't fire Travis. And then Travis quit.
Uber.
I'm sorry, Uber. See what I did there?
Tesla had an executive change this week too, but yeah, that's a relatively more minor one.
Yeah, well, and I was also like, right before we jumped on the cast, I also saw your tweet from the other day where Tesla should just buy Uber for stock. Yeah. But yeah, Uber. I'm sorry, Uber. We said last week Travis wasn't going to leave or be forced out, and then he was forced out.
Yeah, amazingly enough, the board actually decided to stand up to Travis, even though Travis Kalanick, the now ex-CEO and co-founder of Uber, has these super voting shares that basically give him a majority of the votes on the board, which made it theoretically impossible for the board to actually fire him. There was enough pressure coming from most of the other major investors, the VCs that have put money into Uber over the last several years, and they basically said you've got to go. And so yesterday or the day before, sometime within the last couple of days, he announced that he was resigning. And I kind of figured that eventually he probably would. That he probably would not come back from his leave, but I didn't expect it to happen quite this quickly. And it's possible that it might be related to some other news that also came out today. I guess in a filing in the Waymo lawsuit, the Uber lawyers actually acknowledged that Kalanick knew when they bought Otto and hired Anthony Lewandowski that Lewandowski had taken these documents from Waymo.
Of course he did.
Yeah. So they acknowledged that. And the filings, they say that Uber said that, that Kalanick had told Lewandowski, after Lewandowski acknowledged he had the documents, Kalanick had told him, you have to give them back. You can't use this stuff. That's Uber's claim. I'm skeptical, but I find it hard to believe that given Kalanick and Uber's history over the last 7 years that he wouldn't want to take advantage of that opportunity. But, either way, it looks very bad on Kalanick and Uber. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of what finally got the board to show some spine and tell Kalanick that he's got to leave.
It was all Ariana Huffington.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's not do that to her for now. But yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of people that are saying this doesn't end Uber's problems. Uber is still going down.
Yeah, I mean, I believe they still have some very fundamental problems with their business model, and and that's not exclusive to Uber. That's all of the ride-hailing companies have some fundamental issues with their business models, and they're going to have a tough time surviving, if they do. There's, regardless of who ends up being the new CEO of Uber, it's going to be a real challenge to ever reach profitability.
Yeah, well, it's not even profitability they're looking for, though. Now, I see that. I see this move as the board protecting value for the eventual sale.
Yes.
So
absolutely,
they're just looking at it going, you're killing our value here, and we want to cash out of this thing at some point. So you've got to go, and it's not, Well,
the problem is right now the value is still, I think, too high for anybody to come in and want to buy it. Even if the value has declined, which some reports have said that because Uber is not public yet, so you can't just go and buy Uber shares. But there is a secondary market for privately held companies like this, where you can have private sales of the shares, and I've seen there were some reports a month or so ago that Uber's valuation, in these secondary market sales had actually dropped, so that the share price that people were getting was at a valuation of down to almost 50 billion, which is, it's still ridiculously
right,
high.
Down to 50 billion.
But considering that at their last fundraising round last year, they had a valuation of I think 65 billion. That's a pretty significant drop. In less than a year for this company that is still far and away the biggest in that segment.
Well, yeah, but at the end of the day, too, the issue really is that Uber makes software, and so we keep coming back to that. Do you think that because investors have pressured Travis to step down, and they're trying to sort of recenter this business and make it work? Do you think that it dooms some of the like self-driving car and partnership initiatives, or do you think those actually get on track and become more viable now?
I don't know. I don't. Their self-driving car, their autonomous car program, has been troubled for a long time anyway. We've seen more issues with their cars, doing inappropriate things on the road than with any of the other companies' vehicles that we've seen, in terms of running red lights, getting into accidents, that sort of thing. So, I don't think that their autonomous technology is particularly strong. And if they did get much from the stuff that Lewandowski brought from Waymo, apparently it hasn't benefited them all that much. So, I don't think that they have much to offer on the autonomous driving side. And, like you said, they're a software company, and it's software that's not really all that hard to replicate. It's not that hard for other companies to do the same thing. And, other companies have popped up to do the same thing.
Right.
Lyft, for example.
Well, and Lyft is, Lyft is very much sort of stepping into the fray here while Uber goes through its convulsions. They're making a lot of moves to improve their business. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And, Lyft has a much friendlier public image as a company than Uber ever has. But that said, they're far from perfect either. They've had some issues of their own, and, one of their big investors happens to be a guy named Peter Thiel, who, is, in terms of personality, probably not all that different from Mr. Kalanick.
He's
in a lot of respects
worse
in some ways. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to say that because, I don't want him suing us into oblivion, but.
That's true. Okay. So the things I have read in the propaganda websites, say that he's not doing nice things. Yeah. We're not even on their radar. He's, no. What is it? SCL and Cambridge Analytica and all those.
Yeah. So anyway,
that's another podcast. But so, we talked about this a little bit in our Slack channel yesterday. Was at a certain point, this whole sector seems like it's either going to get absorbed into something larger, or something's going to happen. Like the future is muddy for all of these companies, just because they're really, what they're doing is they're reinventing public transportation, and turning it into sort of like public transportation for the wealthy, or the relatively wealthy, in an on-demand way, while stuff like, taxis and buses and, other forms of sort of public infrastructure have to serve everybody. Uber and other ride-sharing services, you need a smartphone and a credit card. So unbanked people miss out. And they lose money on every ride. So while they're sitting on $50-something billion of valuation, they're not making any profit. That can only go on for so long. And while the system is great to use, when do we wind up going like, hey, you know what? Like this is fun if we just want to keep giving people rides that are subsidized by somebody's investor money. What's the end game?
I think the end game is almost certainly services that are operated by the car makers that are building autonomous vehicles.
that you're leasing or somebody's paying a monthly fee for that, so that the car, like the service, isn't free.
Right. The service isn't going to be free, So, I mean, companies like Uber and Lyft, and Didi and, these other independent ride hailing companies, I think will end up either going away or being absorbed into car makers. And the car makers will be the ones that run these services, so that they're not paying a share of the revenues to some other middleman. And and they'll have to offer a variety of different types of autonomous mobility services at different kinds of price points, with different degrees of service. So, you're going to see everything from, more luxury oriented services, that I've written about, where you have a premium experience, maybe guaranteed shorter wait times for a vehicle, or, vehicle be there when you can request it ahead of time. It'll be there when you want it, that sort of thing. Different kinds of amenities, and then more affordable services, some of which may even have to be, cash-based services as opposed to, paying with a credit card, because like, as you mentioned, there's a lot of people, especially in urban areas, that are unbanked or underbanked. They don't have enough money to afford to have a checking account and a credit card or a debit card. And so they operate in a cash society. And, I mean, here in Detroit, that's particularly a problem. It's estimated that somewhere between 30 and 40% of residents of Detroit are underbanked. And so, they rely on check cashing services. When they get their paycheck, they go to these check cashing shops and, they get cash out and do everything with cash. And so, these services are going to have to find a way to adapt to deal with that. And it's not just here in the U.S., but in a lot of other countries, especially, places like India, for example, where a large proportion of the population, doesn't have access to plastic. So we've got to find ways to evolve that. And so you're going to have a range of different services, and, cities are going to have to deal with these companies and make sure that the services integrate with mass transit systems, so that you have a combination. You have this ecosystem of a variety of different types of services, that includes small individual vehicles, maybe larger luxury vehicles, some middle-sized vans, so, I mean, the sort of thing that Waymo is trying to do with the Pacificas, and what Ford is doing with their Chariot service with 15 passenger transit vans, so you're going to have this range of different types of vehicles and different offerings at different price points, and that are suited to the needs of a particular community.
Yeah, I just love I've seen this tweet go around, but I just love the quote. It's like, every couple of weeks, one of these tech guys reinvents the city bus.
Yeah, pretty much. The city bus or the taxi.
Yeah, which is like, it's completely accurate. It's like, well, if, ride sharing and you could have it pick up and drop off at, predetermined locations on a schedule. It's like, great. Thanks for the subway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an example is, just yesterday here in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan at M-City, the autonomous and connected research facility they have here. They announced that they're partnering with Navia, which is a French company that makes these autonomous electric shuttles. And it's pretty similar in concept to what Local Motors is doing with their Ollie, and there's a couple of other companies doing similar types of things, where it's a pretty bare bones vehicle, but it's autonomous. Uses LiDAR and other sensors to navigate around, and it's electric. And they're going to launch a service this fall with the 2017 school year, when the students come back on the North Campus here at University of Michigan, with two of these Navia shuttles operating between parts of the North Campus. It's about a mile apart, so it's about a 2-mile route, running every 10 minutes. And the idea initially is, the rides are going to be free. There will be someone on the vehicle, that's monitoring things, just to keep an eye on the vehicle and make sure that everything's running correctly. But also, they'll have cameras on the inside and the outside of the vehicle to see how people are using these vehicles, how pedestrians and other motorists are interacting with them. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. Some of these, they've already got some of these vehicles running in other cities around the world. There's some that, they started last year in Nice, France, and they're in a couple of other cities as well. I think there's some in Singapore. So this will be the first deployment here in the U.S. of these types of vehicles. So this is kind of the middle, the mid-size type of vehicle. So the Navia is not that big. It's about, I guess, about 12 feet long, about 12 feet long, holds about 12 or 15 people, and, just navigates its way around the campus.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to see more of those kind of places where it fits. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to stop sounding like an alarmist now, and we can just move on and then say that.
Definitely, we got to keep ringing the alarm bells, because there's still lots of things to resolve. There's still a lot of problems to resolve before. One of the issues, with the Navia vehicles, this will be the first time that they're running in service. For example, in winter weather. Come the end of the year, they're going to be encountering snow, and they actually they've had one that they've been doing some testing with since December here. So they did get some experience driving in winter last year, even though it was a fairly mild winter. But it's going to be interesting to see how they work, with passengers, and out on the public roads instead of on the test track.
Yeah, well, and part of it is the autonomous issue, and they're going to have to choose, some of if they're using hybrids, you're going to have to choose fuel economy or, actual operation in those conditions and stuff. It's all going to be a trade-off, and you've got to look at the cost of overall operating that fleet. What do your costs do in the winter when it's colder? You've got to run the heat, use more fuel, you need to be properly equipped. So I'm really looking forward to actually these problems, seeing how they get solved, and solved in maybe a clever manner that you wouldn't initially consider.
Right. So it's important that they're doing these tests so they can learn these lessons and figure out how they have to adapt these vehicles. And that's the other thing with autonomous mobility vehicles, is they're going to have to be constructed in a whole different way. But that's a topic we can get into another day.
All right. Well, but speaking of construction, that's a good segue to our next and last topic this week, which is the IQS scores, which I will plead ignorance. I know what they are. It's the J.D. Power initial quality scores, which basically says, these cars have X amount of defects per 100
vehicles.
Per 100 vehicles for this model year. So it's sort of a running metric about how well they wind up on dealer lots, right? Right.
So, what the IQS survey, the initial quality study, is something they've been doing since 1987, and they survey owners after the first 90 days of ownership. So they're looking for the kinds of problems that people are encountering, right off the bat, right after they take delivery in those first 3 months. And what's interesting, if you look at the results over the last 30 years now, this is the 30th year that they've been doing this. The nature of the kinds of problems that people are encountering has changed. First of all, the number of problems per 100 vehicles has dropped significantly since they first started doing it, but the nature of the problems has changed as well. And it's it used to be a lot of fit and finish and reliability and those sorts of problems, things that didn't work or were physically broken. And now more often it's not as much about those kinds of issues as it is about design related issues and how humans how the drivers interact with these vehicles. So the biggest grouping of problems that they're discovering now are in the infotainment and technology area.
Right. So the mechanical stuff, and this was actually one of the points I made about that 530 again, was the mechanical stuff seems like they've got it down. It's the electronics and the systems, the driver, the human machine interface that's causing all the trouble.
Yeah. So looking at, top 10 problems for 2017 cars, number 10, cup holders, people complaining about the cup holders.
Well, come on.
Yeah. Center console storage, materials scuff or soil easily, paint imperfections. So I mean that's now you're starting to get into a real more of a manufacturing quality issue than a design issue.
The whole the first couple make me wonder, did you sit in the car? Did you look at the car? Did you buy the car with your eyes closed? I think
in a lot of cases the answer to those questions, except for the last one, is no.
And the last answer is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things you can easily find out. But the paint quality thing is that is an issue.
Yeah, but the top two problems by a pretty wide margin. And the thing is, those were all those 7, 8, 9, 10. They were all up through number 3. From number 3 to number 10, they ranged from 2.6 problems per 100 vehicles to 1.6 problems per 100 vehicles. So, less than 3% of owners, experience those problems.
And those 3% are just whiny.
Yeah. But the top two problems by a wide margin. Number 1, built-in voice recognition frequently doesn't recognize or misinterprets commands. Number 2, built-in Bluetooth mobile connectivity, frequent pairing and connectivity issues. That's 6.8 and 5 problems per 100 vehicles.
So, I drive a lot of cars every year, and so do you.
Yep.
And 2 of the biggest problems I have are that the damn thing won't connect to my phone. And I don't use the VR that much, but when I do, it's just I wind up saying no to it and exit and quit or whatever. I try to get it to stop because it doesn't work all that well. Some of it actually works better than you'd think now because it's, they're moving towards cloud connected systems where if it has a solid, 4G connection, it'll decipher. And the voice recognition is just better. Nissan's system is old now, but it's always been surprisingly friendly to use. But yeah, those are things that they're still trying to solve. Those are not going to be easy to fix.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind, again, especially with the voice recognition in particular, for several years now, there's been this pattern where if you look at the IQS results, voice recognition has been one of the top issues that people complain about in those first 3 months of ownership. But then when you look at the long-term durability study that JD Power also does, which covers 3 years of ownership, voice recognition tends to drop down to the bottom. And I think what's happening there is, when people first have the car, they're having issues with the system. Just getting used to the system, trying to figure out the syntax of what the vehicle, how to talk to the vehicle, what commands it knows, what it doesn't know. And then, over time, they eventually either just give up, which I think is probably the case, in most cases, or, they'll adapt to it. They figure out, okay, these are the commands that the system knows reliably and can recognize reliably, and people use those. So in either case, the reported number of problems is going to decline over time. But you're right about these so-called hybrid systems, that combine the embedded capability in the vehicle for when you don't have a connection to the cloud, and then also cloud capability that sends your voice command up to a data center, does the recognition and parsing of the syntax, understanding, trying to, because there's two components to this. One, you've got to figure out what are each of the individual words a person is saying. And then what does that sequence of words mean together? And that second part is actually the much harder part of it, trying to understand what a particular sequence of words means. And that's where most voice recognition systems struggle. And so they're getting better at that. And as you said, some of these systems are now cloud connected. And so they have access to a lot more powerful computing to do that recognition. And so it's coming back more reliable. But it's still going to be a problem for a while, I think.
Yeah, well, and some of the systems, too, they're now getting natural language recognition. And it'll get better. But for me as a user, too, I just wind up giving up, which I suppose that a lot of people do, because our Jeep has voice recognition. It's just it's not worth it. It winds up not saving you any time or energy. It is handy when you're trying to do something and you're driving. Like if you're trying to add a location or something to the nav system and the screen is locked out, you can get at it from the VR. You just have to be patient, and it's still distracting because you're talking to the machine. So it has its place, I guess. It's another way to actually put data into the system. That's probably the area that infotainment lacks, I think, the most is these voice recognition systems, and it's probably because it's the most difficult, or one of the most difficult challenges to overcome.
It absolutely is one of the toughest challenges to deal with. But overall, the industry as a whole is definitely making progress. I mean, this year, the overall average, the overall industry average was 97 problems per 100 vehicles. So less than one problem per vehicle was the industry average. And for the second year in a row, Kia came out number one in the overall rankings.
Yeah, and Ford is the top full line automaker, right?
Yeah, Ford jumped from 11th last year to 4th this year.
And then Chevrolet.
Yeah, Chevrolet is Chevrolet was they were at 6th last year and this year, and they were tied this year with BMW at 88 problems per 100 vehicles. Genesis was number 2 behind Kia. They weren't ranked last year because they weren't a separate brand; they were part of Hyundai. But Hyundai dropped from 3rd to 6th, even though their total score stayed the same, but or actually got better. So they went from 92 to 88 problems per 100 vehicles, but everybody else got a bunch of other companies got a little bit better, a little faster. So that number 2 position for Genesis though seems a little like, that's a little bit like damn lies, and statistics, right? Because they make what, 2 cars, 3 cars? 2 right now.
Right. So you've got a small group of cars to concentrate on and to have problems. So it naturally follows that if you're not making that many cars, there's just not that many problems per 100 to have, right? Unless you're making completely terrible cars versus
although keep in mind, that they are premium cars, premium luxury cars with a lot of features in them,
right? And
a lot more things to potentially go wrong.
That's true, and they are impressively good. I will give Genesis that. This current generation of Genesis cars is good, but they're just not. There's not the vast amount. They're not selling 250,000 of a single model like say Ford does with the Fusion. Plus, pickup trucks plus compacts. There's just a lot more cars to be reported on problems per 100 versus Genesis that sells. What do they sell? 10,000 cars.
Yeah, if that, yeah.
Yeah. So
and one of them, the G80, has been around, it's in its 3rd year now, so they've had time to sort everything out and make sure that it's all working. So, it's certainly, you can't complain, about having only 77 problems per 100.
No, absolutely.
You're right. I mean, it is sort of, not, it's in some respects, it's an easier problem than it is for Ford or Ram or Chevrolet, to achieve, scores that high. And, all of them did really well this year. Ram in particular jumped from 19th last year to 4th this year. They were tied with Ford. Yeah. And Chevrolet was just behind that.
So I think the real thing that impresses me is both Ford and Chevrolet being so high on that list, because they make everything. Yeah. And they make a lot of everything. Everybody else up there, they make a little bit of something. So again, just the sheer volume, Ford is ahead of BMW, and IQS is a little bit of that's the sort of more important numbers is that 3-year or 7-year quality study, for durability or reliability. I forget what they call it. But the IQS
durability study. Yeah.
Yeah. The IQS tells you these guys have, they're paying attention to quality control on the new stuff. You can be reasonably assured that it's going to work as advertised when you buy it off the lot with the IQS. It doesn't tell you much more than that. Right.
And there's also a few other interesting data points from this study this year. For the second year in a row, the domestic brands actually outperformed the import brands, and non-premium brands did better than premium brands on average.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't know what that really like. I don't know how to unpack that other than to say like it seems like they've got their act together.
yeah, they're certainly trending in the right direction. And overall, between European, Japanese, domestic, and Korean, the two Korean brands, or three Korean brands now, I guess, with Genesis, outperformed everybody by a pretty good margin. The Europeans were at 102, the Japanese at 101, the domestics at 93, and the Koreans at 81.
Yeah. It underscores the idea that it's tough to buy a bad car these days.
Yeah. Except for one particular brand, which declined to share any of its user data with
Mitsubishi?
No, Tesla.
Tesla. Oh, well, screw them. They're
the only ones that declined to share data with JD Power.
I mean, Tesla is this beautifully designed product that like they're quickly coming to the point where they're going to get their clock really cleaned by a major automaker.
And with that, maybe we should jump into listener questions.
Yeah, we'll just leave that as a prediction. Dan says stuff that may or may not be true.
The first listener question we've got is from our friend Jonathan Brown, who asks, Tesla Model 3 for winter driving with snow, do we need to wait for all-wheel drive? And I think this is related to the fact that, Tesla has said that the initial batches of Model 3s, when the car launches later this year, maybe, presumably,
eventually,
it will be basically just one configuration available. The only options that owners will have to choose from is color and wheel design. Everything else will be one standard set of equipment on there, and part of that is rear wheel drive only. So at some point, they have said that at some point they will offer a dual motor all wheel drive version, probably later in 2018, I would guess. But to Jonathan's question about rear wheel drive versus all wheel drive, I think the same answer applies here as to any car, regardless of propulsion system. Winter tires.
Yeah, and I think it actually applies more so here because you've got a lot of good low weight in this. You've got a lot of good weight down low, which will improve your traction with winter tires. The thing to be careful about is when you do start to slide, it will also tend to accelerate because it's heavy.
Yeah, in the case of the Model 3, and the same thing applies to the S and the X, because they're electric. You've also got a lot of low end torque right off the line. So I think presumably the traction control should be tuned to deal with that. And keep the power delivery to a minimum when it detects that wheel slip. But still, that is something you might want to watch out for. But in general, regardless of what kind of powertrain you've got, a good set of winter tires in snow will overcome a lot, regardless of which wheels are doing the driving. I remember, years ago, when I had my first Mustang. That one had no traction control on it, no ABS. And my wife's car was a front wheel drive Mercury Sable. I had a V8 Mustang, and I put winter tires on my car, at Thanksgiving, and took them off in the spring. And, it got better traction than hers did with all season tires and front wheel drive.
And that's exactly what I do. I put the tires on at Thanksgiving, take them off at tax day. And the rear wheel drive cars in the winter with winter tires are fantastic. And I tend to prefer the way you can rotate them a little bit, where front wheel drive car tends to just sort of understeer off the road, but winter tires solves a lot of ills.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Just put some good winter tires on and you're good to go. Let's see. Also on Facebook from Mark Reynolds, he's in the market for a new car and seems like, three requirements are mutually exclusive: luxury, heated leather seats and sunroof, non-German, and a manual transmission. And he's also on the larger size, so I don't feel comfortable in a Sentra Turbo or a Focus ST.
What about a CTS? Can you get the manual in the CTS, or is it only ATS?
I think it's only the ATS now.
Damn, that blows my theory out of the water.
You might still, I think
You should try
get
it.
into CTSV.
Yeah, that's not what I was going for.
Yeah. Let's see. You keep talking for a minute while I look this up.
Well, let me think. Let me think of what else has a manual transmission. You going to be able to get it in a 3 Series or an Audi or
Not German. He doesn't want a German car.
Oh, not German. See, that's the problem. Not German.
Well, something to consider. Is
Chevrolet SS.
yeah,
Done.
yeah, it's done. It's not available anymore.
You can buy it. Use.
You might be. Yeah, you'd have to look long and hard to find one, I think.
Yeah.
But he said, he's looking for heated leather seats and a sunroof. So those are luxury features. He doesn't necessarily say a luxury car. So in that case, if he's looking for those features,
Focus.
you can get those in a Honda Accord.
The Accord Sport, right? It has the manual.
Yeah.
If you want it in like
Accord.
Yeah. Manual transmission Accord Sport in like one color.
Yeah. And actually on the 2017 models, the 2018s are coming soon, but on the 17s, you can actually get a V6 Accord with a manual transmission still.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I think in the coupe, I believe. I don't know if you can still get the V6 manual in the sedan, but you can definitely get it in the coupe.
So just to sort of set your expectations too, like the V6 manual Accord coupe is like it's maybe not Mustang fast now, but that's like S197 Mustang GT fast. That's a quick car.
It's an under 6 second 0 to 60 car.
Yeah, it feels sprightly, shall we say?
Yeah.
I was also thinking like, okay, not German, but Volvo. Can you still get like an S60 with a manual?
I think you can get an S60, but he's talking. He needs some room.
Yeah, it's a tight car.
The S60 is a bit tight. I'm surprised that he doesn't feel comfortable in a Sentra Sentra. He says Sentra Turbo, Focus ST. Let's see, Sonata. I don't.
You can't get
with a manual anymore.
Can't get a manual in the Sonata. No.
Yeah.
Subaru. I don't know. I don't know if you have the Legacy, but the Impreza you can still get with a manual.
Yeah, the Impreza might be a little small.
The Impreza is not as small as it was. That's what the Impreza is, I think, roomier than like an S60, like we talked about. I think it's roomier than a 3 Series. It has grown, and that's a car that is actually, it has some benefits. It's got all-wheel drive. You can get the eyesight stuff if that's important to you. You can get it with a little bit of luxury in it too. Like it's the best Impreza that's ever been, and they've just gotten better and better. So that's one to check out.
Yeah.
Or a Forester.
Yeah. I was thinking the Acura TLX, but you can't get that with a manual anymore. Just a DCT or a 9-speed automatic. So I think the Accord might be your best shot at getting a manual with the kind of features and the size and roominess that you're looking for.
Isn't there?
Not other options.
I thought there was a Jalopnik or Car and Driver? Yeah. Oh, Jesus, we forgot about the Mazda 6.
Yeah, the Mazda 6 you can get with a manual transmission. So there
you go.
And you can get it with with the Grand Touring, with leather and all the nice stuff in there and a manual. So
I feel like we took way too long to land on the Mazda 6.
Yes.
That should have been our first thought, and I think that is.
I don't know what was going through my head.
That's indicative of Mazda's problem in the U.S. market, right there. Yeah. Even the car guys forget. And we got a couple of other questions, didn't we? Got at least one more.
Yeah, let's see. There was somebody else. Aaron mentioned, read that only 38% of 18 models offer a standard transmission option. Is there a future for the third pedal where the third pedal disappears? Yes, absolutely. The third pedal is probably not long for this world, except for maybe a few sports cars, and even there, it's going to become increasingly rare. With fuel efficiency and emission standards everywhere. It's a combination of declining demand from drivers, and with the emissions requirements, it's actually now a lot harder to meet fuel efficiency and emission standards with a manual transmission, because what they have to do for the certification is they actually have to run some studies with consumers, to basically to gather data on where the actual shift points are going to be. And then they use those shift points in doing the certification tests. And so it makes it more of a challenge to hit their targets with a manual transmission. With an automatic, you can control all of that stuff. You can control exactly when it's going to shift, during the emissions cycle, based on loads and speeds and everything. And it's just a lot easier to manage. That's why most manual transmissions or most automatics now get better fuel economy ratings, and usually better performance these days, unfortunately.
It's sad.
You'll just have to find yourself an old Mazda Miata to buy, like I did.
Yeah, they're out there. They are. Okay. All
right.
Next question.
Do you want to get into malaise?
Yeah, I think then that can be it. We can jump into that. Oh wait, you know what? Actually, I have one more. Actually, my friend Zach, he's been shopping for a car and he lives in DC, so he's like trying to find a plug-in or a hybrid, and he wants what he wants. And
BMW 740e, it's both.
Yeah, I don't think he has. Don't think he has the dough for that. But he's asking
he'll save it at the pump. It's 43 miles per gallon.
So he's got a couple of questions. Let's go through these really quick. Okay. Should I be scared of a Fusion hybrid reliability, assuming an 8-year ownership period? Well, the only thing I will say is Ford seems to be having trouble with the Fusions with stuff that's not related to the hybrid system, such as the head units.
Yeah, but that's a separate issue. I mean, as far as the hybrid powertrain goes, I would not be at all concerned about that. Yeah.
So the problem is the Fusion, not the hybrid Fusion.
Yeah, I mean, they've run those hybrid drivetrains in Escape hybrids for hundreds of thousands of miles as New York taxi cabs without having any problems with them. The hybrid powertrains are fine. I would not be at all worried about the durability of those.
Okay.
Any other issues on there is something else entirely, but I wouldn't worry about the hybrid powertrain.
Right. So the hybrid itself is going to be fine. The Fusion might have problems. So, okay. Anyway, why the expletive does Toyota not add Android Auto? I don't know. I'm surprised because the new Camry is out and it should have it and it doesn't.
Yeah, they have opted not to support either Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. They are incorporating Smart Device Link, which is the open source version of Ford's Sync App Link. It was originally developed by Ford. As App Link, and they open sourced it so that it allows you to control certain compatible apps through the head unit on your smartphone, but Toyota decided that they want to control the user experience. They want to have control of that. One of the other advantages with Smart Device Link versus Android Auto or CarPlay is that there's more vehicle data available through that interface, so that app developers can do things when they're working with Smart Device Link that they can't do with Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in terms of getting, for example, vehicle speed data, fuel economy data, so they can create different kinds of apps than are supported with the smartphone systems.
I guess, but it's just like having experience with Toyota's Entune systems, like get over yourselves, guys. Your experience sucks. You should
granted, I haven't had a chance to live with the new Entune system yet. But the new system that's launching on the Camry is a completely new system. It's totally unrelated to the previous system.
I hope so.
It's been redone from the ground up. It's actually running on automotive grade Linux now. The previous system, I'm not sure what OS they were using, but it was actually developed in conjunction with Nuance. And it had its issues. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
The new system is all new. And certainly looks better. We'll see how well it works once we've, they just did some media drives a few weeks ago, and I haven't had a chance to drive the Camry. Hopefully later this summer I'll be able to get in one. and we'll see how that system works.
Okay. And the last one, at what point does someone turn in their enthusiast driving card for picking a hybrid? And I don't think you have to, especially if you're talking Camry hybrid, because the last two generations of Camry hybrid have actually been the best Camry hybrid. And the new one or the best Camry to drive has been the hybrid, and the new one is probably still that way. I really liked the Fusion hybrid as well. I thought it drove really well. So I don't think you have to turn in your enthusiast card. And you can always get yourself a used Miata.
And even the current generation Prius, if you disregard the way it looks, is not terrible to drive anymore. I mean, it's
that's true.
It's a drive.
I did like the TNGA. I was shocked at how good it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got much better driving dynamics than any previous Prius. It's not particularly powerful. So if you want a more aggressive hybrid system, you probably want to take a look at the Fusion, and then the Hyundai Kia hybrid system in the Sonata is actually pretty decent as well. And there's also the new Hyundai Ioniq, which is another one that's worth taking a look at. So yeah, I mean, the latest generation of hybrids are actually quite good. And then, depending on how much money you want to spend, some of the BMWs are really nice as well. We were talking about the 740 earlier, but that same basic powertrain is also available in the 3 Series and the 5 Series, as well as in the X5. So, there's quite a few options out there. All
right. So let's wrap up with the malaise.
Okay.
And let me pull up. It's which is worse to live through or better? I forget, but either way, which is worse to live through, the malaise era or the coming autonomous overlord era?
It's the answer to that is not entirely obvious. In part because we haven't lived through the autonomous era yet, and we don't know quite how it's going to play out. Certainly in the malaise era. In the 80s. I mean, I grew up, I got my driver's license in the early 80s. So I was, kind of on the tail end of the malaise era, and it was, the cars then were pretty bad. But I mean, they were pretty bad in
they were all bad. Like, yeah, what I like about the malaise era was, that for all the complaining, there was a lot of effort. And I say this as somebody who only was around, like, I was born in 77, so I didn't experience it with any kind of, like, sort of awareness. But those cars were around when I was a kid as well. And while they had their troubles, there was at least an effort to meet these mandates. We've seen recently they're trying to disassemble the EPA. I mean, during the malaise era, they instated the EPA. Nixon gave us the EPA.
Right.
So, like, we started making progressive progress through the malaise era. Part
of the reason that the cars were the way they were is that engineers were struggling with, how to make them work reliably, with this brand new technology they were trying to implement, to try to meet these new emissions and fuel economy standards. And so, yes, engines were underpowered and they often didn't run very well. They were a pain in the ass to work on. If you ever looked under the hood of some of those early 80s cars or late 70s cars and saw the rat's nest of vacuum tubes or vacuum lines, vacuum hoses running everywhere. It was just a nightmare.
But, they were doing the best of what they had.
Absolutely.
I think, and you probably, from an engineer's perspective, you can probably speak to this even more with more authority. The world changed on those guys really, really quickly.
It was almost an overnight kind of thing where all these standards were imposed on them, and they had to create the technologies to be able to meet those standards, and then start to improve the cars again.
Right. In the middle of product cycles.
Right. And so it was a real challenge. And at that time, we were, they were just starting to use, we had the very earliest generations of microprocessors.
Right.
And they were just starting to figure out how to do electronically controlled systems. and do the software for these things and how to implement all this stuff and try to get the cost down and get the reliability up. And once they did that, by the mid 80s, they had started to get a handle on all of that. And that's when we started to see things really take off again. You had the combination of, the first round of CAFE requirements plateaued, in the latter part of the 80s. So they didn't have to keep improving fuel economy. But, the technology, they had gotten sorted out. And so that's when we started to get into this sort of golden age that is still going on now, where they were able to use the electronics to make, to increase the power, increase the specific fuel or improve the specific fuel consumption of engines, so that they were, even though they were maintaining average fuel economy at about the same level for about 20 years, over that same period, they more than doubled the average output of engines and made them more reliable and smoother running, and everything about them was, at least from any kind of quantitative measure, was vastly improved. As we talked about last week, from a driver's car perspective, in some ways it has caused a decline in recent years because, quantitatively the cars have gotten better. But realistically, we can't, we're at the point now where we can't really use those improvements effectively anymore. So what, in terms of, as we move into this era of automated vehicles, I think it might actually be better in some respects, for those of us that want to keep old cars running. We'll have the opportunity to, we'll have some cars, from the late 80s, through the early part of this century, that are some really cool cars that, they did some really great stuff with those vehicles. And, we'll be able to keep tweaking those and keep them running and have a lot of fun with those cars, hopefully at least through my lifetime, and hopefully well beyond that for younger enthusiasts.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that we can look at this coming period with sort of just as much trepidation as people did about the malaise. And we joke about it now, right? The malaise era, but everything was fine until 1972, and then it was a completely different world, and then we got whacked again in 1979, and in between there was a recession, and it took a while for the Moore's law to sort of catch on, and the technology to just get that critical mass of being as inexpensive and capable as it became in the 80s. So use that as a model, right? This stuff right now, this autonomy and all of that it's expensive, and it's in its infancy, and it doesn't work great all the time. And give it another 10 years.
The truth is, it's going to be, a lot of years before that stuff dominates anyway. You're going to have plenty of time to figure all this out and drive and enjoy the cars we have today. Yeah.
So I think that the malaise was probably worse than the autonomy era until they take our cars away.
Right.
and then
when they decide that human-driven cars are absolutely illegal, then we'll be out of luck. But
then you will wish for the malaise. You will wish for a Volare with the Roadrunner package.
You'll wish for a 105 horsepower V8 Mustang.
Correct. And on that cheery note, I think we should wrap it up this week.
Absolutely. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.